Well, Marisol, we have 40 participants on the line. I don't know if you want to start.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our very last task force meeting. It's going to be bittersweet today. Gosh, it has been, we have all dealt with a lot over the course of this process. So thank you all for being here. Just thank you. I know there's going to be lots of thanks and hopefully lots of celebration today. We have built in some time. Jacob and I were talking that it's sad to be ending this way instead of being able to go out and celebrate with all of you. But we have added hopefully a little bit of fun into the agenda at the end. We have a lot to accomplish today, though. Our goal today really is to get through the report, resolve any unresolved comments. As you all know, we have been working throughout the last week to get everybody on the same page, make some compromises and move this forward. But we still have some comments that need to be brought to the whole task force, and that's what today is about. We also will then talk at the end today a little bit about the rollout. So as some of you know, I've shot some of you some emails about participating in op-eds or presenting to City Council. So we'll go through that this afternoon also. But before we dive in, it's our very last good news. So we would love it if everybody would share a little piece of good news because we have to have some. And not everyone's can be that this is your very last task force meeting. It can't be everybody's good news. So, all right, I'm going to start from the bottom of the list today. Veronica, do you have some good news for us today? Is she here? Oh, she may not be here yet. Okay. How about Tyler?
My good news is that the neighborhood pool finally opened this week. And so we have one very happy toddler in our family who loves the pool.
Very nice. Mine is not open. That's a big bummer. I'm jealous. Thomas, good news.
Told some of you earlier, but my good news is I get to go camping tonight. I am looking forward to getting outside.
It's going to be a beautiful weekend and hot down here, so it'll be beautiful in the mountains. Sebastian.
My good news is that I chose to defer from college for a year. So I am looking all over for things to do. If you would like to hire me for any consulting role, any assistant role, this is my plea. Thank you.
Very nice. Sebastian, what made you decide that?
I figured, I was given the option and I figured, college is going to be subpar this year. And I just figured it was the right call.
That's great. Well, congratulations. I'm sure you will have many opportunities, my dear. How about Sam? Got some good news for us?
Proud moment for me. I successfully changed out virtually every fixture, including all of the ceiling fans in our house, and didn't electrocute myself or burn the house down. So I'm very proud of the work that I completed over the weekend.
Very nice. Rhiannon. I saw you.
My good news is that I'm going camping again this weekend, which will be the 4th weekend in a row.
Wow. Where are you going this weekend?
Up to the Winter Park, Fraser area.
Very nice. Nice. Enjoy. Lots of campers. How about Peep?
Two quick things. This week I got to help connect a bunch of people that are going to run a Black Lives Matter bike ride starting at City Park at the MLK statue. So that fills my heart with joy. And in the not filled with joy, but happy that things are moving along safely, my sewer line is being replaced and the guys doing it have been very neat.
Oh. Neat is a good thing when it comes to sewers. So yes, can understand that being some good news. Patty.
My good news is I just set up a brewery date with some friends because I haven't had a touch of alcohol during this COVID time period. So
that's impressive.
No.
Naomi.
I'm taking the day off tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's Friday. So I'm gonna run some errands and try and get up into the mountains and do a little bit of a hike. So I'm excited about that. And I'm doing the bike ride Saturday, so y'all should all join.
Ah, that's awesome. Mike.
I'm on the board of Black Packers. It's a nonprofit designed to get folks of color out into the Colorado wilderness, and we provide free transportation and free gear. And my executive director just rocks, and we've had just amazing outpouring of support from the outdoor recreation community and others to really fill up our gear locker and provide a bunch of money for our budget. So we're well funded going into next year, whereas like most nonprofits, we were on our hand to mouth kind of setup. So it's been an amazing couple of weeks of folks that are seeing the action in the streets and understanding the inequality that exists and turning to at least our organization to try to see if they can help. So it's been, I'm just on the board. All I get is these great emails say, hey, I got $500 from this person, or we've got 5 new tents from this company. But it's been, it's really been great to see that outpouring and the action in the streets creating what should be real change.
That's really amazing. Thanks, Mike, for sharing that. Michaela?
Hey guys, so my good news is as you guys know, I'm part of and director of a youth organization, the International Indigenous Youth Council, and myself, as well as a few other local artists, music artists, and screen printing, and also some spray painting artists have all collaborated, and we have been doing non-direct violent action training. Our first one was last weekend, and I have to give a huge shout out to Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, so much for providing food, lunch for us. You have no idea. You really helped not only some of our volunteers out, but even some of those that had been out there for a while that were really hungry. So I really appreciate you helping us out. And we will be back out there this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, we're going to be out with the Brothers of Bast, along with other artists. And then Sunday, we're going to be back out there doing the full safety and medic training, as well as more screen printing and spray painting training as well. If you guys would like to help me in any way, support, please reach out. I could really help with, again, water, food, snacks. I'm having we had about 15 volunteers this weekend. We're looking at 20 to 30 more because we really need the help. So if you guys are wanting to help in any way, please reach out.
Thanks, Michaela. You're doing
the
awesome
silk
work.
screen my daughter loves and has it hanging in her room. It's beautiful.
Yay, that's what we're doing now. If you guys are wondering, we're making screens, and that's what Jacob's daughter walked away with when they came. It was really sweet. So.
Great. Lori, we have somebody on the phone, but I'm not sure if that's Lori or not. Otherwise, I don't see her. Okay. How about Kelly?
My good news, I just left a meeting or a workshop, I guess, with the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, and they had Stephanie Donner, who is she runs the Emily Griffith Technical School, and so getting to experience that with what I want to do with my career, and getting to meet her and be in a breakout session with her was really cool, because she could provide an opportunity for what I want to do with my career moving forward and connecting people with access to education. So it was kind of like one of those kismet things meant to be that way. So that was cool. That's my good news.
That's awesome. And is your little girl in the background? Did we see her?
This is
out?
Say hi, come here. This is Aubrey.
Hi.
Hey, Aubrey.
Kathy.
Okay, my good news is we've had house guests for the last 4 days, and my husband has been out. They've been out doing 36 holes of golf a day, and then I've been responsible for the feeding and watering in the evening. And I suppose my good news is that our house guests have left now, and so I have the house back to myself. But it was great to have people in and to hear what's happening. And they were up from Arizona, so to hear what's happening down there, and just great to have people around again.
No more dirty dishes in the sink, huh?
Thank goodness.
John.
My good news, I just got back from Seattle last night, and I was blown away by how quiet, how dead the downtown is. People seem just very, very depressed and sad, and it just seems very recessed. And I'm not saying that's the good news, but this morning I came back and I walked around Ludo, and it was like night and day. It feels like our community is coming back. It feels like there's positive attitude, that people see the end of this coming. And so it was just good to see that juxtaposition between a city that's still really struggling and one that's trying to come back. So that's my good news.
Nice, and welcome back. Jessica?
Yeah, so I think you all know that the majority of our work at Creation Colorado is at the state legislature, and just got word like 20 minutes ago that 3 of the bills that we're working on air toxics just passed, which we were not sure what it was going to look like, but we're working on these before both crises, both before the pandemic and racial justice issues really came to the forefront. And both of these bills, all 3 of these bills, I think are really amazing intersection of the environment, public health, and racial justice. So it feels like really an awesome moment for that intersectionality of our work. And we got it done. It's very exciting.
Congratulations. Jennifer?
I almost survived this week at the session, because our bill, Senate Bill 30, passed, and that's a holistic consumer protection bill that's going to be amazing for energy customers moving forward. So we look forward to that rulemaking. And we just passed the 3rd reading in the Senate for $4.8 million coming to EOC for energy assistance. So we will be getting that money out quickly, and we're really excited about that. It wasn't what we thought was the full appropriation, but it's better than nothing.
Gotta take the wins where you can get them, right? Jasmine.
Since everyone's talking about bills, I must say one of our bills is doing pretty good too. It's SB 55, which is to incentivize the development of recycling end markets. So that passed the Senate, and it's now going into House appropriations. So we're very hopeful and excited. And my other piece of good news is that EcoCycle's Zero Waste video series is also wrapping up at the end of the month. And thank you to all of the council members that have put it in their newsletters just to get the word out. We all know that constant education around what is recyclable and what is compostable and why and how to do it is very, very needed in all communities. So my shameless plug there. I'm putting it in the chat. Please share and spread the word and knowledge.
That's great. Thanks, Jasmine. Jackie.
Hi, everyone. My good news is that, well, it's kind of mixed because as a result of the pandemic and COVID-19, so many people lost their jobs. And the good news is that we were able to help 18 families pay their utility bills yesterday, and able to feed over 140 people and provide food baskets yesterday. So that was really good for us and exciting to be able to help the community that way.
That's wonderful. The silver linings. Frank.
Hello. I feel like I might have mentioned garden in a box before as I was staring at it one day during one of our meetings, but we got our this year's garden in a box, or as I was planting it this weekend, decided to term it metaphor in a box, because since it's about various pollinator species, et cetera, and we're tearing up Kentucky bluegrass in order to plant it, it's an exercise in taking out the old and the bad and repairing it with what should be there all the time, and then in a small little individual effort to help.
Frank. I don't see George. Is that right? Or George, are you on? No. How about, oh, not George, Eugene. I didn't see Eugene either. Nope. Okay. Emily.
Hey everyone. I guess my good news is a little bit of like a ending point here in retrospective of getting to do this work on the task force. I feel like getting to participate in this and learning about all of the work that folks are doing individually around the city has been truly incredible. And I feel like I see so much work continuing beyond this. And there's so many amazing things that I feel like I now know that different members of the task force are doing around the city and around this community. And I'm just really excited about continuing to partner and, you know, I feel like I've already reached out to different people on things sort of unrelated to the task force about some of the work they're doing. So that's sort of the thing that I'm feeling really excited about right now. And probably the next person I'll reach back out to is Mike, because we just this week have been starting to look into potentially finding some ways to put solar on our house. So now I know someone who knows a whole lot about that. So
bring it on, Emily. Come one, come all.
That's great. Dominique.
Hello. My good news, I've been running this webinar series for 6 months now, and today we had a sellout crowd. So we were talking about equitable access to nature, and had someone from the Trust for Public Lands and an author of a book about kids and nature. And we had over 500 people. I don't know how many tried to log on, but we had 500 people attend, which was really fun. So yeah, so that was my good news. It was fun and it went right up to the hour. And then my other good news was my husband made me a grilled cheese sandwich. So yeah.
Grilled cheese are the best. They just really are so good.
I know.
Brandon.
Hello. So I found an IBC tank for $50 on Craigslist, and now I'm building a biogas digester in the backyard. So I'm taking my compost game to the next level.
I feel like you're always like building or tinkering or something. That's amazing. I saw Lori joined us. Lori, do you have a piece of good news for us? Lori. Oh,
sorry about that. I'm in the car clearly. My compost from the city got delivered today, so it seems so ironic that it showed up today. And you would think that we got a new car. My daughter was so excited, and it was, I mean, amazing. Like taking pictures of it, literally like a new car. Taking pictures, sharing it with her friends, and because of all of this, it's just this whole committee brought me and my daughter closer together. She turned me into the tree hugger that I now am. And she had an interview with Botanic Gardens yesterday, and they are going to be taking her around to all the different departments to learn about what the city's doing. And so it's kind of exciting because I know what we've been working on, and she's that next generation that we've been building all these thoughts around. So it's pretty exciting that we actually can talk about this. And I don't know how I came to be here, but I'm so glad that I did. When I say I don't know how, I didn't anticipate that this would come out of it. I knew that there was a reason to be here, but this was just a great way to end all of this and a new beginning for both of us. So I'm grateful considering all that's been going on. She has been an activist in other ways, and to see her being activist for the earth and for just being a Black woman, it was pretty awesome that I got that delivered. So thank you guys for sharing your world with me, because I'm in love with it now.
Oh, that's awesome, Lori. Thank you so much for sharing. Veronica? Oh, you're on mute, my dear.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So my good news is I have volunteers. There's volunteers running the food stuff, the food distribution right now. So I could be here. And also I'm 1 month away from finishing my yoga teacher training. Yeah, so.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How about Sonrisa? Do you have a piece of good news for us?
My good news is that my wife's surgery on her foot and ankle was successful, or so we think so far. And so just in recovery now for her. So looking forward to that. And hopefully we can get hiking and dancing and all those other things soon.
Hopefully. I wish her a speedy recovery. Grace, do you have a piece of good news for us?
Sure. So I've got, I figured out how to put Castlewood Canyon as my background. But I'm actually coming to you today from Chicago. We drove here over the last 2 days because we did finally sell our house in Chicago. And now we have to pack up and get out of it. So I'll be back, we'll be back in Chicago next week, but I'm still working every day. Somehow I'm going to be working and packing and not losing my mind. So
good luck with that.
Yeah, that's the good news.
Liz, how about you?
My good news is my daughter loves swimming and really, really misses having a pool she can go to. And so her grandparents bought her a gigantic, and I do mean gigantic, inflatable pool. So, and it came yesterday. So she's been splashing around very contentedly in the backyard.
Very nice.
And I think Susan had some good news from Laura to share as well. Thanks,
Marisol,
Susan.
maybe you saw that email, Marisol. I think that's what.
Yep. I thought we were going to do that at the end, but we can do it now.
Oh, that's fine. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Doesn't matter. Susan, do you want to share it now or you want to wait till the end? Sounds like Susan might be having some audio problems, so we'll go ahead and wait for the end for that one. Jacob.
Yeah, I have a gratitude, which is just that it's been amazing to work with all of you through this time, and I know we'll do a toast. And yes, swimming is huge, so that's becoming part of our lives again starting tomorrow. But I'm really just so grateful to all of you for putting in 18 months of work into 6 months. And I know it's been a lot, but thank you for allowing me and Marisol to help shepherd this. And we're grateful to know you all and hopefully more partnerships to come.
Yes, thank you. And let's see, my good news. I didn't miss anybody else. I don't think. Okay, my good news is I just got back from 5 nights of camping with the kiddos. We left last Wednesday and came back Monday morning. And we saw our first moose, which I know this shouldn't be a thing, but I've lived in Colorado for 15 years and I'd never seen a moose and it walked right through our campsite. Dog didn't notice, but it was very exciting. Highlight of the kids' camping trip for all of us. So Frank, did I miss? No, you gave good news. There we go. Okay, great. So let's dive in. I think how we're going to do this, guys, it's not pretty. This is not going to be like super facilitation-y fun, but we're going to do our best to get through this. So Jacob is going to pull up the document. We are literally going to start by going through comments, and we're going to hopefully get a lot of these resolved through a bunch of different really great conversations. Today, we might be taking some voice votes to move us through, you guys. We just need to get this done. So be prepared, pay attention. And Jacob, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, so just to reiterate what Marisol said, we need to move quickly here. So let's begin. This is the document. It's beautiful. And it will become more beautiful. Don't worry about that. So one quick thing, we had a comment in here to make sure that we were talking about racial injustice and to make sure race was brought into this equity section. We did that. We added this comment here. If you have any issues as we scroll through, it's your job, even if it feels awkward, to say, I'm uncomfortable with this, or I'd like to see this change as we scroll through. There are some key moments where we'll pause. We did want to have a discussion here that Liz is going to help us through. There is some discussion about what the right language is, and I think that's right here in terms of when we're describing people of color, First Nations, and under-resourced communities. We have all sorts of words about that throughout the document. So Liz, did you want to do that right now? We have about 10 minutes to, hopefully less, to make sure that we can get through this. I've made you co-host, and I will, did you want to share your document?
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. I just put together a very brief discussion guide on this question that Jacob just mentioned. So we're using a variety of terms throughout the whole report, and I just want to make sure that we're really intentional and thoughtful about the terms. Obviously, this discussion could be a much, much longer discussion. There's lots of learning all of us can do. There's lots of space for this type of discussion to be had, hopefully, in the coming weeks and months and years ahead. I know I've done a lot of learning in this space as well, but I think we just want to be really intentional about the words that we use in this report. So as Jacob mentioned, we have about 10 minutes to talk about it. If we don't get to full sort of conclusion or understanding in that time frame, I'm happy to follow up with anyone who wants to continue this discussion so that we can make sure that the words that we're using in the report reflect our intention and our meaning and our values. So Grace had reached out to our Office of Equity and Social Innovation at the city. That office and the city uses the terms people of color, First Nations, and under-resourced communities. Within the document, we use a whole variety of different terms: traditionally disadvantaged, low income, frontline communities, vulnerable communities, and more. Reflecting back on the very first meeting that we all had when we talked about who is going to be most affected by climate change and who do we need to be thinking about as we craft our recommendations, we talked about Black and Brown communities, low income, Indigenous communities, children, people of varying abilities, individuals with compromised immune systems, and homeless individuals. So I just wanted to reference that. I had a great discussion yesterday with Desiree, our equity consultant, as well as Eloisa, who is another equity expert, and Sunrisa, and had great sort of learnings from them about how to approach these questions. So one of the biggest pieces of advice was when we're choosing our language, be as specific as possible and define our terms. Be clear about who we're talking about and err on the side of clarity rather than using vague terms. Frontline communities is a term that does appear in the report. It's actually in the overarching goal. And I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that that term really means and is referring to communities of color that are hit first and hardest by climate change. So that term appears in the overarching goal. It doesn't appear in a lot of other places in the document. So I think we should talk about, if we want to consistently use that term throughout. The other term that has been used quite a bit in discussions and in the document is vulnerable populations or communities. And again, going back to being specific, always ask vulnerable to what? Be clear about what our meaning is. Have we actually done a vulnerability analysis? Do we know that those communities are more vulnerable to a specific factor or condition? So I would recommend language where we would say populations vulnerable to something specific. Again, most impacted communities, very similar to most vulnerable. Most impacted by what? Just being clear about that when we use that term. Underserved or underrepresented communities or populations. These terms highlight the systemic and institutional problem and are not people-based, so it's not placing the blame on people. It also highlights the government's relationship to people in that, the government may not serve certain communities as well as other communities. These are better terms to use than historically disadvantaged or marginalized, as those are sort of deficit-based terms and they're focusing on, they're focusing on people rather than the system or the institutional bias. And then the discussion around race and racism and the need to highlight systemic injustice and bias. There's a variety of terms that we may choose to use in this report, and I just wanted to highlight them for your discussion. So Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or abbreviated as BIPOC, you may have seen. This highlights the unique relationship to whiteness that Indigenous and Black African-American people have, which shapes their experiences and relationship to white supremacy for all people of color within the US context. And then we also talked about the need maybe for a brief discussion here on the appropriate local uses here in Denver and in Colorado of the terms Indigenous, First Nations, Native American, and urban Native community. And then finally, also the locally appropriate terminology around Chicano, Latino, Latina, or Latinx. These are terms that you all may decide that you would like to appear in the report, but I think we need some discussion about that and just consistency of use. Minority, this has been a term that has been requested not to be used in the report. People of color will not be a minority status in the future. And so the recommendation would be just to only use that term when it's specific to a local or state business type, which is a specific certification for minority or women-owned businesses. Those are typically programs that are run by like economic development offices to certify businesses to meet certain qualifications for, you know, public contracting and things like that. So going back to why this is important, I think it's more than a language choice. I think it's really a reflection of our values. When we're talking about equity, what we're talking about is centering it on people who have experienced that institutional or systemic bias. And so I just wanted to ask that question, do we want to emphasize and highlight the experiences of Black and Indigenous people specifically, and you know, as well as the term frontline? So I'll stop here and let Jacob and Marisol facilitate the discussion, but I just hope that that background is helpful for people as we talk about how to use these terms in the report.
And I'm seeing a bit of the chat. Our suggestion is that, yes, we do need a glossary of terms. We talked to Sebastian about this earlier today. And so if we decide to use several of these terms, we can work at including them in the glossary. And I also believe in, for some key definitions, that they're in, quote, real time as you're reading, not having to flip back and forth. So like we might have adaptation and resiliency in a glossary, but we also have that defined in the report itself. We define equity in the report itself. Those are the only two places where we have it. That being said, I think we're interested in understanding if there's a key set of terms that you would like us to use to be consistent throughout the report as it reflects all of those aspects that Liz shared with us. So I would love to hear some initial thoughts and see if we have quick agreement. Should we use the city's already agreed to language, for instance, as represented here? I'm going to share the screen again in this highlight right here. As consistent, unless there's another reason to use a different terminology. Thoughts? I'm going to call on a couple people.
Everyone's ready to get to the drinking celebration part of the meeting, I think.
I'm thinking, this is Veronica. I'm thinking, are we gonna identify what people of color are just for more clarity, like in the definitions or glossary part? Because, you know, people of color, people might think automatically African American or Hispanics, but there's just like a whole mixture in between. And so I'm thinking we should identify that. And I think underrepresented communities, because I could be in a community that is that is very well resourced, but maybe I might be like the only Indian in that community and I'm not represented. So I'm thinking underrepresented might also be considered.
Right.
I would echo that as well in the underrepresented, because it does also pertain to the different communities that we said are overrepresented and over resourced, and being vulnerable there, as we described before, is a different vulnerability than the flip to that in a community that is under resourced. And also the majority of the population would be considered vulnerable based on however we define it. And I think it's amazing that they came up, or the advice was that vulnerability should be defined. That list could go on, but because of what our focus is, it gives us an opportunity to be crystal clear about what the vulnerabilities are, and that would also bring to light and refocus people to why we did this, and so that if they're not familiar with it, many of those people may not even realize that they're vulnerable. So by calling it out makes it more clear, and it's not so generic. I think that was a wise call right there.
Great. So let's not get stuck on language being typed. It's more of a note to for future editing. Other thoughts? How about, should we mostly focus on using this language, this type of language that includes underrepresented throughout the report? Should we change words like frontline communities to be reflective of this type of language?
I think Rhiannon, she chatted, she might want to add. Rhiannon,
Go ahead, Rhiannon. Rhiannon, you may be.
Sorry, I'm having problems with muting and unmuting. So I agree with what folks are saying with the underrepresented communities. I think my only flag is that what I liked about frontline communities is in the different breakout discussions that we've had. I always felt like that included like communities of folks who were like first impacted by job loss due to both climate change and transitions to renewable energy. So I'm fine with changing it to, or being consistent in the usage of something like underrepresented. But I would also think that then we should specifically name, folks who are vulnerable to job loss because of climate change and or that renewable energy transition.
Got it. And so when you're talking about that, as Liz shared in her document, frontline communities are typically communities of color, as it's referred to, who are impacted first by climate change. Liz, did I get that about right?
Yes, although I will say that frontline communities has been used by various groups in different ways, and there's not actually a clear definition that I could find, but that was the most commonly used definition. So I would say that if we want frontline communities in terms of the way that we're using it to include workers who may face job losses as a result of transitions in our economy, that we can be inclusive of that, or we can specifically also name that.
But in your point about not finding a consistent definition of frontline communities, I think is important. So whether, we just have a definition that we all agree on, or we drop the term and then specifically name workers in another part is fine with me. I'll defer to the group. I would like to see workers specifically named, I guess.
And workers doesn't have a racial or ethnic aspect to it. It's more impact based off of transitions due to climate change and solutions. Is that right? Yeah.
I think so, yeah, because obviously workers of color in these industries, I think, are going to face, a more disproportionate impact than white workers in these industries who are facing job losses. But because, and I'm not the expert, so if folks want to push back, please feel free. Because we specifically name race as another factor, that using a broader term of just workers might be appropriate here.
Other thoughts?
I think this is something that the definitions committee that hopefully we hear is going to decide on coming forward, so we can expedite this today, and then everybody who wants to have a voice going forward in the determination of this definition can.
Thank you, Sebastian. So other thoughts? I think the way that I've been thinking about it is when we're talking about equity specifically, we're really talking about people of color primarily. And when we're talking about workforce and some of these other aspects, that definition can broaden based off of, it might include older adults when we're talking about heat waves, for instance. So that we get specific based off of what we're actually talking about. And when we're talking about equity as it relates to that we're clear that that's about people of color. And when we're talking about workforce, that includes that group as well as people who need to be transitioned, for instance. Are people comfortable if that's the way we treat these words as being specific, as Liz said, based off of the impacts and solutions that we're talking about? Rhiannon, does that sit well with you?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Anybody else have any concerns about that? Liz, does that line up with the advice that you're
I think
looking?
that's great. And I think we can definitely work with whoever would like to volunteer specifically for like a language review and edit to these points that we just covered. I think being specific will be helpful for us as we implement the recommendations so that we know that what the intent was, right? So, if you're talking about, if it says vulnerable people, but what you're really talking about is income qualified households, then let's be specific about that. So that'll just really help us with the implementation as well. But I think I have enough information at least to understand, I think, the path forward. And then I would love it if a few folks would be willing to volunteer. And I'm definitely going to be reaching out to a couple people specifically for their input on the terminology that is appropriate in our local context in Denver.
Great. Thank you, Liz.
And it seems like maybe within individual sections, if we need to redefine vulnerable, because as you've mentioned, who's vulnerable to different impacts will be different. So maybe we could all go back and look in our sections, make sure it's defined.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have, moving on. Great job, everyone. Moving on. Any concerns with as rapidly as possible, which is a Sebastian edit? This is just to my language, so I have no issues with this. So an aggressive policy and solutions agenda to implement as rapidly as possible. Any concerns with adding that?
Everyone, what we're going to ask is if you have a concern, if you will raise your hand.
Well, vocalize, right?
Or vocalize, just.
Because we can't really see, especially on screen share mode, we need you to vocalize if at all possible. Okay, so moving on. And Marisol, are you watching the chats?
Yes, I am.
Great. So let me know if something pops up there.
Will do.
Okay. So then, continuing forward, there's just a suggestion here around making sure what's clear in the 39% reduction and what's not. So made that clear and put in some language that there's some continuing efforts that are not included in that and why they're included in the climate action scenario. Any concerns about that? Great. Okay. And then for those of you who didn't see it, we did some math here, 20.2 billion. It's a pretty good deal for investing $3 billion. This is just a little bit of that. I'm gonna scroll a little faster, sorry. This was just a little bit of additional clarity, providing some introduction since we moved the recovery work up front. I don't think we really need to weigh in on that. This was a suggestion made by Peep. The language there was really sort of written for the considerate site. This proposal envisions such and such. I don't think the content was changed too much, but Pete, do you have anything you want to share about this?
No, we were just trying to be more specific.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any concerns other than the extra period, which I will delete? Okay. Moving forward, like Marisol said, we just gotta work through this. So here we're adding in, we just moved in, so we have overarching recommendations, and in there is workforce, so this is one area where we might be clear. And Sebastian has a suggestion here around hiring a jobs director, which is also sitting here as a key strategy. We can figure out if that's a goal or not, but there's some language in here that includes renewable carbon-free energy jobs, energy efficiency, sustainability jobs. We'll make sure the language here lives in one place or the other, or is at least reconciled. Any concerns there?
My only question about that is it seems to be a new goal, and I know that we've set in some, it would be, I'm assuming, you know, a full-time employee, maybe multiple, and I'm curious if we would need to factor that into the overall budget for some of the policy recommendations.
This one has been living in adaptation and resiliency. We moved it up, so that should be factored in. There is a suggestion under electricity for a policy solution that is new that we might want to move here, but that would be new in terms of revenue.
Great.
But we'll get to that. Emily, does that satisfy you? Okay, any concerns? Please trust us as editors to make this all fit. But if there's any language in here you have concerns about, speak. Okay.
Hey, Jacob.
Yeah.
It's Jacqueline. No concerns, but I know that we also have something around workforce under the waste and consumption section. And so I'm just wondering if that should be put up here as well, or if we should reference workforce and waste and consumption as well.
Okay. I'll just put a note here to check on waste and consumption, workforce recommendation.
And happy to work with you, Jasmine, to sync that up going forward if needed.
Sounds good, thanks.
Jacob, under the key strategy in that sentence, could we say hire a sustainable and resilience jobs director to tie in policies to new jobs and help recruit and train local students and individuals, just so that piece around job training for the jobs that will be developed is also reflected?
Sure. Any concerns about that? Okay. Do we want to say if it's specifically under CASR? Liz, Grace, any concerns about that?
What's CASR?
The Climate Office, Climate Action, was Sustainability and Resiliency Office.
What Grace and Liz work for under?
So, I was an initial voice in this. I think the key thing is that wherever this lives has to be able to have a really wide purview of what's going on, because there are already a lot of things happening, and the idea here is that there would be to tie all this stuff together. So it may make sense to live there, but that's, when we discussed this originally, it was a broad portfolio across the entire bureaucracy.
Got it. So
yeah, I think this is Grace. I think we understand that and we agree, but somebody has to own it. So I think we understand that in our department that's the mayor's office will be handing it off to us to then be the organization that will work, collaborate across departments to work to, make sure that all of these recommendations show progress. And we are the ones who will be held responsible for reporting that out to you and the greater community.
Great. Okay, sounds like with the thumbs up from Mike, we have agreement. Speak now. All right. This one, that's just intro language. We don't need to worry about that. We will fix this figure, but it's our way of calling out based off of square footage, the different types of issues, the different types of commercial spaces. Kathy, I hear that you're comfortable with that. And then let's speak up.
I would put up my thumb if I could get to it.
Okay, awesome. And then
I can take over now.
take over now. Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have turned it over to you at the top of buildings.
That's okay. So Tyler had some additional language about the full cost of electrification. There were some notes here and some conversation but he just sent this language this morning and no one has had a chance to review it. So this is very consistent. My understanding, Tyler, please speak up if I misspeak. My understanding is this language is very consistent with what Excel has testified prior, but he thought it was important to put it in this section. So Tyler, do you have any additional context you want to provide? And I'll give everybody a chance to read the language and see if there's any concern.
No, that pretty much covers it. I was just wanted to make sure that when we're thinking about, full electrification and moving away from gas and all the way to electric, that at least initially that the costs to maintain the grid are there's going to have to be quite a bit of an investment into the grid on the electric side. And then as we transition away, making sure that we're thoughtful about the folks who are first and most able to switch from the gas to electric. That leaves who's going to be left on the island, gas island, as you're transitioning away, and just being thoughtful about the way that those policies are enacted, if that makes sense.
Having just first seen this right now, I'm wondering, I think it fine if we want to include factoring in costs of electrification, but is there a way that we can maybe integrate some language around the benefits of electrification?
Yeah, and I think there might be other sections that talk a lot about the benefits, and there clearly are. I just wanted to make sure that the full cost and maybe some unintended policy issues were thought out as well.
Right, and of course there's the cost of not moving to electrification that I don't know if we can fully synthesize here, but.
I have a question about go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, sorry. I think it's too late to put something like this in here. The buildings group should have been about this from the very beginning. And I think our task force is to work towards positive and bold action. And, Tyler, if we wanted to put a piece of this somewhere, I think that's okay. But, the goal of this is to really show where we can go. And nobody's saying there aren't downsides to these pieces, but
Right.
This just seems to undermine the work that we're trying to do here, which is push towards boldness and actually getting to 100% clean by 2040, which natural gas is not.
Right, and I'm all for pushing for boldness and pushing the needle, but I think that it's also important that everybody and policymakers know the full ramifications of policy and not just the positivity of one side of the policy.
I agree with Jessica, but maybe a compromise with throwing the electrification costs but besides some of the benefits that are located in the rest of this document, as well as shrinking it down a bit.
And I'm fine with that.
I wonder if it would also belong better in electricity, in the electricity supply section where you're talking about, grid development. I don't know if
Sure.
Jessica, that would satisfy you.
I have a question.
I'm sorry. I'll just want to make one quick statement. There's nothing in what we're putting forward. I mean, I appreciate what Tyler is saying in terms of just the full weight of knowing what the cost of electrification is. my own feeling is that we don't talk anywhere about, you know, some of the stuff would be so easy if there were a national campaign beyond our city that really saw this process and utilizing this time so that it was really a national workforce development electrification throughout the country. I'm just raising that I think some of the suggestions of the full cost be under electricity or that particular section. I'm in favor of that, but we have not made any statement in terms of, I mean, it would be a totally different ballgame if there on a national scale was a workforce development toward new energy self-sufficiency, you know, just post-COVID creating job creation, much like the Job Corps development in the 30s. Just raising that as it's a piece that's not in there.
Okay.
Yeah, one
We
quick
do have a
comment
full.
is, I was just going to say that the way that I read this is that I feel like the message that you're delivering, Tyler, is that we need to we need to recognize the kind of potential costs and how that might disproportionately impact. I forget what Jennifer's better wording was for low-income residents, but we need to recognize, I think that's how I'm reading it, is that we need to recognize that. But then my question is, aren't we providing those kinds of, you know, proper safeguards through the equity lens that we have throughout the document? So isn't it really kind of already addressed in a manner without having to say this, insert this particular paragraph?
Tyler, do you want to?
What I was trying to ask before was just the term likely disproportionately impacted. I think there's absolutely a possibility that they could be disproportionately impacted, but that would be a significant policy failure. And so I think what would be needed is to specifically and explicitly say what has to be done in order to prevent that from happening, right? So if we were to raise new revenue through whatever means, are we setting aside a specific percentage of that revenue for income qualified households to be able to take advantage of this transition first, so they aren't the last people remaining on the system, or so that they can take advantage of the indoor air quality benefits or whatever it might be? So I think we would want to proactively call out the policy solutions or the ways that we could avoid that negative outcome that none of us want to see. So I think that would be really a helpful piece to include, rather than just sort of saying, well, that's likely to happen, because if we don't want that to happen, then we should make every effort to craft the policy so that it doesn't.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to define a problem and highlight it. Yeah, and so finding solutions to the policy problem is definitely something that we should do. I just wanted to make sure that people recognize that there is a potential for a policy problem here.
Right.
And I'd like to just say that Senate Bill 30 that we just passed actually has this language written in it to some extent that, the Public Utility Commission can't kind of design rates that disproportionately negatively impact households. But I think this stranded cost issue and the cost issue is, real. So I think it may be a way to nuance this language a little. I have some recommendations I sent to Tyler that I had just filed at the Air Quality Control Commission that we just drafted exactly around this. So I don't know if that'll be helpful or not.
Okay.
That's really interesting to know. And I think that this touches on, the interconnection between these city policies. We're talking about some of the statewide policies, decisions happening before the Public Utilities Commission, right? And, being sure that within our policies that we're talking about, that, we're touching on what Liz talked about, that, ensuring that there are protections and that there's not, right, this island of people that are burdened by the stranded costs of, you know, making big investments in gas infrastructure right now. And it's one of the reasons why, you know, certainly and I know a lot of other people are proponents of us getting started on electrification policies. So we're thinking about making investments in like building lasting buildings, healthy homes that are electrified, as opposed to making huge investments in gas when we know that it's such a huge part of our greenhouse gas emission profile in Denver.
Okay, so what I hear as a multi-step proposal is, one, this gets moved to, and I want to make sure I capture this correctly, or Jacob, correct me here. One, this gets moved to electricity supply. Two, there is additional language about the benefits that needs to be added to the full cost of electrification. Three, potentially Jennifer and Tyler can work together to Jennifer, you said soften, so I'm just going to use your nuance. Thank you. Nuance some of the language. Are there other things that need to happen in order to be able to move this piece forward?
The other piece I heard was around leaning forward into here's what needs to happen to ensure that low-income customers aren't disproportionately impacted due to the island effect and increased costs.
Fully agree with Jacob on that, as well as I think we should include a repetition of the cost of inaction that we already have. That's just attach it to the section again. Exactly what Thomas just said in the chat. Maybe that's actually a more specific number of the cost of not electrifying, not just our total costs of inaction.
I think also, this is what I said, just I think the statement that's here does a really good job of kind of outlining things if we were to switch directly one for one, kind of switching from gas to electricity using the existing grid, existing system. It doesn't necessarily talk about, you know, what would a future with electric vehicles that could potentially power back to the system be, or what would it be if you have more distributed generation, or it doesn't talk about efficiency within the system and within buildings and how that might lower demand, or how we could do demand shedding. So there's different management technology, elements that need to be kind of implemented into all of this. But I think it is good for, I think what you're saying, Tyler, is really good. And it's important for us to put out there in any kind of complete responsible report. And I also think we need to somehow mention that this is still a pathway that is undetermined, and we're not quite sure how we're going to get to that final future state that could alter all of the assumptions by which we're using right now on our back of the envelope kind of estimations.
I totally agree.
Okay. Can I ask a question around this first idea of moving to electricity supply? Electricity supply is about where we're generating electrons. This whole section is about how we're consuming electrons on the demand side. I don't know why it wouldn't just continue to live here, since this is the section that's calling for the increased electrification. I think just knowing what I know about the electricity supply section, this doesn't have a clear place to live.
Yes, I think that's part of the problem. That is why it ended up in buildings, because Jacob, if you scroll up, this is, keep going. Because of this, nope, go back down. It's because of the 2040 goals. I believe that is where Tyler started reading that and said, but there is some cost here that we need to take into account or highlight. Is that correct, Tyler? Because I remember this is where your initial comment.
Yeah, I think so. For me, it makes more sense and applicable when we're talking about, you know, electrifying buildings and moving away from the gas system. It makes more sense here than it, like Mike said, in the electricity supply group. It would, for me at least, feel like putting it in an awkward place.
And we leave this up to editing afterwards, and we'll double check with you, so we're focused here on content.
So I think the proposal on the table, so now if you could scroll back down, If we do these few things, but I guess there is a question, would anybody be extremely opposed if it doesn't move to electricity supply, given what you've just heard? Okay, so being that, if we do these other, sorry, I have to move my chat box over so I can see the comments. These other 5 things. So we add language about the benefits. Jennifer and Tyler work together to nuance some of the language. We lean forward on policy for ensuring low income is not disproportionately impacted. We provide some cost for inaction, and we talk about the management technology or distributed generation and efficiency in the system. If we make those changes to this piece, can anyone not live with this section being in the document?
There's a suggestion in the chats to change the title, and I'm completely fine with that. I was struggling to find an appropriate title for it as well, so
considerations regarding
editing as well.
Yep, perfect. Great.
Yeah, this is Jessica. I just would want to see how it ends up with that, with the nuance as well as the benefits plus the costs. Because I think ultimately we're coming from a values perspective that there are far more benefits of switching off of fossil fuels. So I would just love to be consulted on that.
So Jessica because we're trying to get to consensus and vote on the full document today, knowing that there are going to need to be some edits. So if we say Jennifer, Tyler, and Jessica will work on this to move it forward, would that be okay?
Sure.
Would anyone have I'm going to ask one more time, just before I move on, anyone have a problem if those considerations or changes are made, given the people involved? Can we move this forward? Can anyone not move this forward? Excuse me. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, and I think with that, buildings.
Is there anything else in buildings?
I'm not sure, keep scrolling. Okay. So this is not a word change. This is just a conversation on this program suggestion. So connect/enhance low-income programs, including incentives that improve indoor air quality and health, ensure ventilation is sufficient, and that upgrades improve overall health and safety. The buildings group initially put it in phase 2. Thomas has recommended it move to phase 1. Kathy made the comment that she's concerned how much is being front loaded in phase 1 and that it's not actually feasible. So this is a decision point we need to make. It's going to happen one way or the other. Does it need to happen in phase 1, or can it stay in phase 2 where the buildings group recommended?
Can I just chime in real quick?
Yes, whoever.
It's Thomas.
Thank you.
I was looking at this as I think that as we've discussed through this and the equity side of things, that low income is a priority for us. And I feel like we need to get started on all of the low income stuff ASAP.
John or Kathy, do you have a counter of why it was in phase 2?
John, you can chime in here too, but I think what we're looking at was just the sheer number of things that we were trying to do in phase 1, and that phase 2 really, when you look at it, is only 18 months away. So we were trying to get things in place and get programs created and established that could then roll into this. My concern is that, we keep wanting to move things to phase 1, and I understand the desire to move quickly, but I also don't want phase 1 to implode because it's just got so much in it that we can't possibly get to it all.
Jacob, could you scroll up to the phase 1 in this area?
Yes.
I mean, just one area, obviously, but just so we can see how many things are in phase 1 already. Got it. Okay, thank you. So task force, those are kind of the 2 points on the table. Does anybody have feelings one way or the other?
Marisol, this is John. I'd love to just add from the buildings group. You know, I think I agree with Kathy about the overall concern of making sure that we're not trying to do so much that we fail. However, in thinking through this specific change, I support moving it to phase 1. And the reason is because it's about creating programs, and there's going to be a natural tail to that. It's not that these changes are all going to happen necessarily in phase 1. It's about creating the programs that then lead to these changes. And so to me, I feel like implementing that early is something that's not only valuable, but important because it gives people more of a runway to get this executed. So I support this change.
Okay. So Kathy, given that, is anyone not okay? Kathy, would you
need to fall on a sword for this one?
Okay, I had a feeling, that's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I just, and it's almost just sort of looking actually through the entire document, the amount of stuff that we're trying to accomplish in phase 1. I'm just concerned that phase 1 has 18 months, and are we biting off more than anybody's going to be able to chew? Not that I'm saying it's not important and we shouldn't be doing it, but I don't want to lose out on things because we just can't do it all.
Understood. I think it's definitely a good
concern. I think it's 30 months though, just if I'm doing my math right.
Well, if phase 2 starts in 2023, 2023, sorry.
No, I mean, it's still a short window. I'm not arguing that. I just want to make sure that this is 30 months, not 18.
Okay, so Kathy has some concerns, but she's not willing to block it. Anyone else, is anyone else not okay with moving this, would block the vote at the end of today to move this from phase 2 to phase 1? Great. Right. Jacob, can you go ahead and accept Thomas's and resolve this issue? Thank you. And with that, one more in buildings. Oh no, there we go. Okay, one more. This is another one that it's residential PACE financing for zero energy ready homes. Be careful of predatory lending. Again, Thomas has a concern that this isn't moving fast enough. So this is currently slated for phase 2. My proposal was to move it to it's currently slated for phase 3. My proposal was to move it to phase 2. Kathy, I have a feeling you're gonna have the same concern that we continue to front load things. But anyone else want to weigh in on this? John?
Well, I'll just add that this is just a financing mechanism, and it's something that from what I understand, there's no real cost to us to do this. It's just a tool that gets implemented, and so I don't have any concern at all with pushing it up, and I actually don't totally remember why it wasn't in phase 1 already.
Yeah, I think it wasn't in phase 1 already because if it's anything like the commercial PACE financing, it required legislative authority to be able to do it, and that took some time getting it approved at the state level, and then getting the city to sign on to that. And I don't know enough about the residential PACE program to know if it would require the same stuff. My assumption would be
it would.
That's why we put it in a different phase.
Yeah, that's right, Kathy. It would require state level action, and then each county in the state then has to subscribe to the PACE program through their county assessor and their county treasurer. So that is something that here you have it as advocacy. So it would be something the city could advocate for the state to do, but the state would have to ultimately be the one to initially take the action, and then Denver could sign on to the program after the state went through.
But
like we did with
our PACE is already approved, and Denver is a county that's already where our PACE is allowed. I just put a link.
Commercial PACE. Commercial PACE.
It says residential PACE here.
Residential PACE doesn't exist, is my understanding.
No, it definitely does. Residential PACE exists and is currently allowed by law. Commercial PACE does not. There's some federal issues.
No,
commercial
it's opposite, Mike.
Opposite.
Look, right
Got
here.
it backward.
Hold on. Oh, you're right. My bad.
I was like, what? I don't know what's going on.
Like, oh my God, my people have been doing commercial PACE in years.
Yeah, I think the reason we were very active getting the city to sign up for commercial PACE, there was a lot of concern that the county treasurers had because counties are actually on the hook for loans that might default. So, so anyway, I don't know that we need to kind of, you know, get through all the technical details, but just suffice to say that state action is needed first before Denver could do anything. So Denver could certainly advocate, but before this could actually become an option in Denver, the state would have to take legislative action, and then we would have to sign on to the program.
Liz, could we change the wording slightly in order to get into phase one, since we can't, city council or the mayor cannot implement this anyway, and say that we will evaluate and present a proposal and advocate for it at the state level in phase one, rather than trying to require that we're implementing something that we don't necessarily control?
Yeah, I think that's more appropriate. I also know that there's significant concerns about the predatory lending piece. And so I know that some people feel like PACE is a really, really great tool for this, but a lot of the other programs that have been set up in other places have been really, really concerning when it comes to predatory lending. And so, yeah, I think it needs to be really, whatever legislation moves forward has to be really thoughtful. And if Denver ultimately had concerns about proposals the state was putting forward, we would need to advocate for, you know, those predatory lending components to be really protective. And if we didn't feel that the state reached that, maybe it's not something that Denver would want to implement for those reasons. So I think it has to be a thoughtful evaluation and advocacy approach. Right, so if we change the language to evaluate and present, can we move this? Is anyone not okay with moving this to phase one?
Well, I would say, y'all, is I know that the Colorado Energy Office was working on residential PACE last year, and they had been recruiting and kind of doing the rounds on it. And Julie Saporito put in the comments that, you know, Jeff King and others would be good to kind of figure out where they are on this. So I guess the point is, I'm not sure what roadblocks they may have run into as to why it has, you know, there hasn't been much traction on it yet. So as far as whether it would be a phase one or a phase two type of effort.
Yeah. And I think I guess I would defer to Liz and Grace and Katrina and say, and just ask, there are a lot of things throughout this whole document that we're asking them to evaluate and create policies for and do this and that in this next 30 months. Is the capacity there to do all of what we're asking you to do? And with this one being something that there's obviously a number of issues ongoing, would this be one of the ones that could wait for phase two that's not maybe as urgent as some of the others?
I mean, it is currently in phase three. So maybe instead of moving it all the way to phase one, could the compromise be to move this to phase two?
Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Would anyone not be okay with moving this one as an evaluate and present a proposal that gives the city time to do that? Time to check in with the appropriate people, moving it to phase two from phase three. Great. Thank you for the compromises, everybody. Okay, we're gonna keep moving on. I'm looking at the time. We haven't even gotten through buildings. No, we did. Everyone take a pause. We got through buildings. Yay! Okay. All right, transportation, let's go. Keep going, keep scrolling there, Jacob. We should have had some music playing as he's scrolling. If anyone wants to sing,
yeah, wouldn't that be good?
Oh, please. Okay, Peep, this is your section, but you wanted to add a sentence. Would you like to discuss this, please?
It's so quick. This paragraph talks about the benefits of land use policy, and because it ended up all in transportation, I realized we didn't have any examples from sort of the more building side. So I found one, this is it. It just gives an example of the savings that can occur. And I'd like to include it in this paragraph.
Okay, just for, because she is right, all of this was included, ended up being in transportation, even though it crosses sectors. So is anyone not okay with including this sentence in this paragraph? Great. Oh, do we need to go back?
Sorry, problems with my mute. Could we just have it stop at detached homes?
Compact attached dwellings unites use
less energy than similarly sized detached homes.
Period. Instead of installing.
I must have a funny spelling in here. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, is that consistent with the actual statistic?
What was that?
Is detracting that wording still consistent with what the actual statistic was? I don't know. I just want to make sure.
I think since it's just, this is Lana, if it's just talking about the building usage and not considering the transportation energy, then it wouldn't matter about the sprawling neighborhoods.
Cool.
Okay. Great. So we will add that sentence, but stop before sprawling neighborhoods. Great. Kind of keep going, looking for our next comment. Here we go. Pete and Naomi.
I just need Naomi's brain because I thought with the free transit piece that we began in phase 1 with plan and begin implementing. And I'm wondering if we lost that or if I made it up.
That makes sense. So we can edit that to say plan for Denver to pay for phase 1 and then move that other piece to phase 2. What does phase 2 look like? I wonder if
So phase 2 says implement, but I thought at one point we had in here plan and begin implementing. And what I had in my head here, which I just need your memory reference here, is that Denver might be able to get started on some things like, for example, the youth piece. They are already sometimes doing that in the summer.
Okay, yeah, we'll flesh that out.
Okay, anyone not okay with small tweaks to the language here by Peep and Naomi, who have been the leads on the transportation section? Great, moving on.
Thank you, Marisol. Look at that.
Okay, Pete.
Yeah, my fault. I found this reference this morning. I'd like to put it in consideration. So we developed 3 boxes in transportation. Implementation, which is we'd like the city to do this. Evaluation, which is we'd like the city to evaluate this and then figure out how to do it. And consideration, which is a placeholder for it. These are some really good ideas that you could consider to get towards your goals. So it's not a you must do. And there was a really interesting recommendation from Sweep about fee baits that I just lost track of, and I found again this morning that I'd love to put back in here. So consider fee baits as one way to get at these goals.
Would anyone not be okay with adding this as a consideration in this section? A system of fees on high polluting vehicles that are redistributed as rebates for EVs. Again, these are just considerations. These are not the implementation or the actual, you have to do this. These are good ideas that you should consider.
The only thing that I would bring up is I'm recalling at one point we were talking about a concern about that unfortunately sometimes some of these high polluting vehicles are owned by people who are in the populations that we're trying to protect. Mm-hmm. And would this be hit them more in order to give rebates to because it seems to me like right now, the most of the people who are buying the EVs are the people who maybe wouldn't necessarily need a rebate. So I would that would just be a concern I would have, is the impact on.
Yeah, I would have that concern too. I mean, I think this is an existing example that we can look to in Boulder. And so again, by putting it here in consideration, we give hopefully city staff the opportunity to take a look at it and evaluate whether it makes sense or not.
I'm curious if one protection around that might be like to target it in on like heavy duty vehicles. So those are, you know, a heavy duty vehicle is owned and operated usually by a you know, larger company or corporation is operated in Denver. So there might be some targeting that maybe could be considered here.
It's a really good idea, Emily, because what we've seen with the COVID situation is that commuter vehicles obviously are taking a lot fewer trips as people are teleworking and staying home more. But we're still seeing a significant amount of air pollution from larger vehicles, from a lot of like delivery trucks, et cetera. And so figuring out a way to get at those vehicles could solve the equity problem and also have a good air quality impact. And if you redistributed the funds in some way to incentivize fleet electrification or EV rebates, that could be interesting.
And the technical work indicates an 18% decrease with our recommendations on diesel. So there's more work to do on diesel.
So if this is in a consideration with some caveats around equity and targeting heavy duty vehicles, would anyone not be okay with including this as just a consideration moving forward? Okay, great. Thank you. Peep.
Yeah, this is also new and slightly nuanced. I mean, we are essentially providing a host of different micromobility options and ways to really be creative and take advantage of all of them. What I would like to add as a last sentence to this section on micromobility, and then also as a bullet under, I believe, evaluation, is that the ultimate goal the city either should or could look to would be to plan, fund, and manage micromobility as a form of public transit. And the distinction there is that, you know, they're currently doing a lot of really cool creative stuff, but it usually involves leveraging partners. So we've seen a lot of those partners come and go because it's an interesting market right now.
Okay, so the transportation team would like to add this additional sentence. Ultimately, the city should plan, fund, and manage micromobility as a citywide form of public transit. Does anyone have any issues with adding this sentence to this paragraph?
And I'm open to saying either should or should consider.
Should consider.
No,
should consider the same as explore. And is there a time framework? Only because I think that, I mean, I would be in favor of that the wording is explore and manage, you know, with the assessment of the efficiency or productivity or whatever. I just I just have a question on
it's helpful to scroll to the actual recommendation that this points to, which is a little further down. It's the next comment, just to see how it plugs in.
Sorry, we can.
Further down. That last one there. Oop, oop, go back. Stop. Right there. So the way I wrote it was study options to plan, fund, and manage micromobility as a citywide form of transit.
As part of phase 2. Patty, does that satisfy your concern?
Yeah, I just think that the wording rather than a should be explore.
Pete, Naomi, are you guys good with explore?
I am.
But my name isn't either Peep or Naomi.
I'm sorry, Frank.
I prefer should. I guess well, maybe let me put it this way: is if explore is really getting at the issue of whether or not that the planning and the funding, et cetera, would help us achieve those goals, then maybe I would insert more clarifying language to say the city should do this as long as it achieves the climate objective. Or, I don't know exactly how to say it, but.
So that makes sense to me, because the reason that I was working to put this in there is that it's a really dynamic environment right now. It's not something that we can do right now. So we're starting with, some of these creative elements at the moment and relying a lot on private partners who keep going belly up, which means that by the time we get to phase 2, about 30 months down, we could see a whole different climate. And at that point, it might be very clear that the only way to ensure that everybody can access micromobility options citywide is that we actually run, own, and manage it. But it could also be clear that working with the private partners is working fine. So we do need to look at that, and we need to seriously consider it. And we don't know the answer right now. Is that about right, Frank? And in other words, that might be the best way to get at our climate goals, is to actually take micromobility solutions over.
Okay, I mean, I'll go with that. I just think that it comes out to be exploring. That's my only.
Should explore if it is needed to meet our climate goals, something like that. That puts your idea and Frank's together.
Jacob, I think you need to scroll up.
Sorry.
How about if I continue this discussion and include the 4 of us who've been talking about it?
Great. So if Naomi, Frank, Peep, and Patty all work on adjusting a little bit of language here, can anyone not move forward if this language is adjusted, knowing the smaller group that's going to finalize it? Great. Thank you.
I don't know that we need to spend time on this. This was just my edit for consistency discussion back and forth.
Okay. Don't need to talk about it then.
Electricity supply.
All right. Can we give transportation?
Yay.
Yay! We're getting there, guys and gals. Okay. Electricity supply. Keep going. Keep going. Oh. Okay. Okay, so I am going to ask Mike and Sam and Tyler to first start us off, and then I'm going to ask Thomas to express your concerns. We met with as a small group yesterday. We were not able to come to consensus to move this forward. So there is some questions about how specific language needs to be in some of this section. And so Mike or Sam or Tyler, can you please describe your concerns with making it too specific? And then Tom and Sebastian, if you will then describe your concerns with making it less specific. So. Mike or Sam, Mike and Sam.
I can start us off. I think Sonrisa actually said it really well earlier. I'm not sure I could say it any better. I think the goal here was to acknowledge that we can't really predict sort of the future and future technology applications. And so the language here is really designed to just be technology agnostic, recognizing that if we too narrowly define generation sources now, we could perhaps limit the city's exploration of new technologies we don't even know about today in the future. And so I think by making it carbon free, we felt like we were acknowledging that any of the technologies under consideration shall not, under any circumstances, contribute to climate change or additional greenhouse gases. And I think we thought that carbon free kind of captured that term, but I think there's some question about that. Mike, Tyler, please feel free to jump in.
Yes, +1 to Sam. That's where we land on that.
Okay.
Agreed.
So Sebastian and Thomas, do you guys want to give your concerns about that language?
Thomas, you can go first.
Yep. Also, number one, I think this leaves a lot of loopholes for the continued burning of fuels. My biggest concern is that I don't want us to be promoting burning of anything. And the point, except for hydrogen, possibly. But the point with going to emissions free is that it also covers more than just carbon emissions. It covers all other pollutants as well. And looking at this with an equity lens, we know that low-income communities are impacted by emissions more than anybody else. And that's really the direction that I want to go.
I totally second all of that. I wrote just a couple things down because this is something that that has really troubled me. I will not feel super comfortable approving this and pushing this report through if we don't listen to this and take a vote on it. So I'm really glad that we're doing so. As everybody on this call, and as Thomas just said, carbon is not the only greenhouse gas nor the only pollutant from fuel combustion and other methods of energy generation. And we define the emissions free. We have an obligation as a climate action task force to not only address the gases that create the greenhouse effect, but also to look at other pollutants, some of which aren't just carbon and some of which still do advance the greenhouse effect, but aren't necessarily carbon dioxide, such as sulfur dioxide, nitrous dioxide, methane, and other forms of particulate matter. And that's really, to Sam's point, that is not to say that we shouldn't remain technology agnostic. We should absolutely keep the doors open to new technological developments in energy and generation, but thanks to environmental science, it's a beautiful thing. We now know what hurts the environment, and we need to limit new technology to the confines of the term emissions free. And so I do request that we, unless anybody else has anything more to say, I request that we move to a vote on replacing the term carbon free with emissions free, not just in this section, but in all other applicable sections throughout the document.
Mike, you're on mute.
He says I know. Okay, so there is.
Can I just add to what Sebastian was saying? The emissions-free part is really key too, but there's also the pollution like byproduct or whatever. So my problem with nuclear is that not, clearly it's clean in a manner of speaking, but then you have the, the whatever hundreds of thousands of years of the byproduct lasting in the environment. So that's one of the key pieces that I would want to make sure is addressed in any kind of rewording.
Okay, so there's a couple options on the table. So before we're calling to a vote, I don't think we're quite there yet. There are some in the chat. Frank and Dominique have suggested adding shall not contribute to climate change, air pollution, nor create any waste byproduct, etc. So that is one way. That is one thing that could be added to this sentence. That does not get to the overall point of changing all references to carbon-free to emissions-free. That is a different part of the conversation. So
if I could jump in, Marcel, I think this is a challenge that our group tackled, I think, early in the conversation, and this is the difficulty of this sort of issue is that, for example, in my mind, if we add waste byproduct or the like, and we're serious about battery storage, and we start acknowledging the effects of rare earth mining that goes into production of those batteries, lithium batteries, we've limited ourselves in some capacity because there is no sort of penultimate solution that I think will capture all the elements that the entire group here probably would want to see incorporated in sort of a complete list. And so I think, again, when we thought about this as a group and life cycle analyses and of these different technologies, and to Frank's point about nuclear waste, the direction we thought the most critical direction we could give to the city was this idea that whatever it is greenhouse gas, whatever terminology we want to use, greenhouse gas free, emissions free, whatever it may be. But as soon as we start to sort of depart from that, I think it's going to be really challenging for anybody today to deliver a technology that will meet sort of what we're trying to define here for electricity supply.
I fully understand that. I think what we can hopefully move to a vote on, though, is that in the process of direct energy generation, there cannot be emissions and hopefully a waste byproduct. I know, but I also acknowledge that with the waste byproduct piece, there's certain complications and contingencies to that. So.
Others want to chime in?
I might suggest breaking it down. So we talk emissions free first before we talk about waste byproduct. What do you think, Marcel?
Yeah, so the question is really, are we using throughout the document, there's been a proposal to change every reference to carbon free to emissions free. Does anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, yeah, because it's not, I mean, it's just not about carbon, right? I mean, carbon is not the only greenhouse gas. So I think that we have to be a little bit broader, I guess, with our word choice. Climate, it has no negative climate impacts or something to the effect.
I just don't want to see carbon free again in this document. Agreed, Frank.
So that expands the mission of this group quite a bit. And we've literally been using the phrase carbon free since our first awkward meeting, downtown. And look, I'm all in favor of it, but I'm not sure that my guys can meet this standard. And I want to sell a lot of solar and a lot of batteries. And if you define it simply as, scope 1, then fine, but then there is no difference here. If you really want to take an expansive view around the circular economy, I can't sell any batteries into Denver if we adopt this. And so that's,
Can you explain that? I don't understand that at all. You would be able to sell batteries.
My batteries have a 10-year lifetime. There'll be a waste byproduct at the end, right? You'll have this solid state lithium ion battery in 10 years that will be waste. Some of it will be recyclable. Every year it becomes more and more recyclable.
We're on a mission right now. Just saying.
Then fine. Then I think maybe Jonathan's question might be an interesting one. If we took green renewable hydrogen and burned it, would that be also disallowed? Because we expect solar will create a whole lot of green hydrogen.
I think if we can specify the language just to make sure that if water is a byproduct of the process, and I don't know, we're gonna have to get down to specificity at some point here.
Do we really believe that if we outline something that is a cleaner, better, new technology that comes out, that we wouldn't be able to adopt it because of something that we recommended to council right now? I feel like if something better and cleaner came out, we would absolutely adopt it regardless of what we're specifying here. I think it's getting a little ridiculous.
Agreed.
This just seems like to me a pretty dramatic change to be making at 3:15 in our last meeting. Help me understand why this didn't come up before. we got to
I
this.
brought this up a long time ago, and I don't know why it got pushed to the side, because I brought it up in the beginning.
So what if the language was greenhouse gas emissions free? I know that doesn't solve all the concerns. And it's not specific on scope 1 or scope 2 or scope 3, Mike, but I think the intent is that it's really, at time of energy creation.
Agreed. Yeah,
So,
it's narrowing down what we can do during energy generation. I'm okay accepting the consequences throughout the process, like Sam was talking about before. I know there are massive consequences throughout the production processes of all the solutions that we're trying to push in this arena, but during electricity generation, I advocate for emissions free.
So
like there was an early breakout group when we were still meeting in person where we discussed this thing, and I believe Emily was part of it and Sam, and I believe we determined emissions free at that point in time as well. We had the same debate then too, so I'm not sure.
Let's just see where we're at. Let's do a thumb poll. Anybody uncomfortable with greenhouse gas emissions free? Anybody who can't live with that?
We can't see everybody's thumb.
No, sorry.
I just want to point out that greenhouse gas emissions free is the same thing as carbon free.
Yeah, I guess
right?
that's sort of the semantics
different.
issue. Yeah, Liz, I appreciate you saying that. At a certain point, I think we are saying the same thing. And I really want to acknowledge the sort of thoughts that Sebastian and Thomas are bringing to this, and I think Brandon brings out a sort of important point too, which is if there is a technological advancement, I don't expect that the city and all of us, if it were available to residential consumers, wouldn't adopt it immediately. So I think all we were trying to capture here was this idea that we needed to be technology agnostic, and I go back to what Sunrisa said, which is, I think confirmation that the city will look at these things holistically, regardless of the language we choose.
So Frank is also recommending that, given in light of Liz's comment that their greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions free are both saying the same thing, if we go back to Dominique's suggestion of adding a sentence that says, shall not contribute to climate change, air pollution, or create any waste byproduct, etc., is that a compromise?
I'm sorry, is that a definition for emissions free? I'm confused.
And does that address Mike's concern about his solar batteries being a waste byproduct?
I think it does, because we're not explicitly saying there can't be any emissions throughout any point in this process. It's only during the electricity piece of it.
Okay.
Electric generation, I think, yeah.
Okay. This is Alana. Just the way that's written, if it's just during electricity generation, I still think that would leave the door open for nuclear. So it seemed like some folks might have a problem with that, and you might want to call that out specifically.
I'd like to try to get emissions free down first, though, and then we can move to waste byproduct.
And I think this is an important part in regards to the definitions section too.
Yep.
Call out specifically that we're not recommending nuclear. We're not recommending the continued burning of natural gas, renewable natural gas, or the burning of fuels.
So Mike, Sam, and Tyler, I do want to check in with you because I know everybody, we're spending a lot of time on this, but I want to tell you that I facilitated a number of these discussions, and this smaller group has never been able to get to consensus. And so my fear is if we just punt this like we've done some of the others to have a smaller group work on this, we're going to come up with the same issue. So that's why I just want the full task force to understand why we're spending so much time on this. Mike, Sam, and Tyler, I would like you to weigh in. If we add this sentence that says, shall not contribute to climate change, air pollution, or create waste byproduct during electricity generation, can you live with that, or does that still raise concerns for you?
I won't block that.
Okay, Mike would not block it. Tyler?
I won't block it either. Is it time to start drinking yet?
We're getting there. We're getting there.
We're getting there. Sam?
Could you just restate the proposition one more time, Marcel?
Yes, so we're going to leave it as carbon. Can you actually scroll up a little bit?
Yeah, it's way up here.
So the sentence will still read the same as it's reading right now, with both renewable and carbon-free electricity options, blah, blah, blah. And then the next sentence will be, shall not contribute to climate change, air pollution, nor create any waste byproduct during electricity generation.
Got it. I will not block that.
I just want to double check in here. We're good. This means no biofuels. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that and good with that.
I just would go back to echo Sunrisa's comment. This limits a lot of things. And again, I think the intention here is right. The question is, given that we spent time early in this process really advancing our timelines and thinking about the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 timelines we have now, this qualifying language really does inhibit what I think the city will practically be able to deliver. And I think that's a really important component of this electric supply space, given what the city itself has purview over in terms of electric generation within city boundaries. And so,
yeah, one of the things the city is advocating for right now is combined heat and power incentives. So, we have, it's not located within Denver, but it serves Denver, the wastewater facility. They capture the biogas that's produced, and that's a product that you can't eliminate, right? It's produced by our wastewater system, by human waste. And so you have to do something with it. You have to have whatever the most beneficial use of that biogas is, which is essentially methane. And so what do you do with it? Well, you could turn it into renewable natural gas for transportation, or you could turn it into power generation. You could capture it and use it for electricity generation, which is what wastewater does right now. And it sells a portion of that to Excel. So I would like to not see things like that limited.
Sebastian, Thomas, is there a change in language that you would be comfortable with that would not have it be so limiting?
I think we accomplish what Liz is saying if we have a byproduct provision. Basically, if it is a byproduct, if it's a byproduct of our wastewater system or any other, municipal waste system or otherwise, that's the exception. That's the only exception to this rule. But no new power sources are allowed to generate emissions or be under the clause that we just advocated for.
Okay, Emily has a suggestion that Mike and Sam have agreed to. Let's see how this sits with Thomas and Sebastian. We would say the same sentence, but it would then continue with the line, with preference / priority to technologies that reduced waste byproduct and co-pollutants.
Love it.
Sebastian is good with it. Thomas?
It's not quite as strong of wording as I would like.
Thomas, will you block the report if we compromise on this?
No.
Can anyone?
Is there anything we can do to make it stronger?
I want to say that something to the effect of technologies that do have a byproduct or co-pollutant are used as a last resort.
Okay, where technologies that produced waste byproduct and co-pollutant are used only as a last resort.
So I wonder too, Thomas, just out of clarity, right? So like nuclear, for example, creates a byproduct that I would imagine that you would like to be as a last resort. But biogas coming off a landfill or biogas coming off a wastewater treatment plant, where methane is the byproduct, would you see that as being a last resort, or is that more something that you would want to do right away?
I personally think there's other uses for methane than as a fuel.
Agreed.
There's lots of new technologies coming out that can be used to make different types of plastics and other materials.
Hey, task force, I just want to let you know we have 33 minutes remaining in this meeting. And we do have 3 other sections to go through. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Can we move emissions-free document wide just to a vote and get it over with? Whatever happens, we need to be done.
I thought I heard Thomas say that he wouldn't block it. So I thought that was, I understand you'd like something stronger, but given that it's a very specific thing and there's a long report, it seems like if you won't block it, I feel like we're at consensus here.
Okay. So with preference / priority to technologies that reduce waste, byproduct, and co-pollutants, we'll add that sentence and we will consider that this is consensus. Okay. Jacob, as the person that understands all the voting rules the most, Sebastian has asked for a vote on emissions-free versus carbon-free.
Yeah, so we can do a consensus -1 vote. That's not a problem on that per our voting rules. We don't currently have provisions for how to handle supermajority votes in our last meeting. So any changes in voting rules we adopted via consensus the first time, and so that would be the standard by which we would need to change our voting rules if we were to do that. But Sebastian, I think you're just asking for a consensus -1 vote. Is that accurate?
That's correct, just at least initially.
So anybody, Marisol, go for it.
Are you gonna do a poll?
No, I'd like for us to, I can do a poll, but then we have the transparency issues. So I thought we were going to do it verbal vote. Yeah.
Let's take down, we'll just do a hand vote. Actually, can you take down share screen?
I will.
Thank you. Okay, so the proposal is on the table is to universally, instead of using carbon-free, use emissions-free. All in favor of using emissions-free over carbon-free, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, it does not pass because it's not consensus -1. So we will keep it.
Good.
Sorry?
We have all the votes, and I think I see people, I don't see everyone's vote.
Well, if they're not raising their hand, they don't vote for it. Okay, so thank you all. I know that was really not, I know nobody is incredibly happy, but I appreciate the work to come to consensus and to really work through that. We believe that was going to be the hardest one of today. So let's see if we can keep moving forward. Okay.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify? So then does that mean that the consensus was around that language that somebody read just a little bit before the vote?
Yes, unless somebody speaks otherwise.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So let's move on. Johnny, you made a comment here. about adding an explicit recommendation. I don't know if you want to talk about this. Liz, you also chimed in on this, but I don't believe any task force members have.
Sure. Everyone. Yeah, it's something that we brought up in the report, and it's listed as one of the recommendations in phase 1 for active participation in state affairs and Public Utilities Commission proceedings. More specifically, I kind of just asked if, similar to some of the other sections, pulling out as a key recommendation, something actionable for the city would be expanding the depth of our policy and regulatory team. Right now, there's a lot of work that falls on my shoulders and then a few others on our team, and having a dedicated person that can help to advance our objectives in regulatory intervention, make sure that Denver is having as loud of a voice as possible to advocate for the types of things like we were just talking about for the past 30 minutes or so, and being able to really collaborate with other stakeholders at the PUC as well as Excel Energy in implementing those solutions as affordably and reliably and equitably as possible as we move towards as fast of a decarbonization as we can, would be really helpful. And when we look at the cost recommendations at the end of the chapter, advocacy really seems to be the biggest bang for our buck and opportunity where we can make really large systemic change by having a few people have those voices. So that's the hope, is whether or not the group would be willing to pull it out a little bit more explicitly, maybe put it in bold as something that the city could consider as we look to the future.
Jonathan, this is Naomi. Would this person be solely dedicated to like these particular issues? Because I just know on the transportation side, we have called out some specific state legislative action. So I'm wondering if this staff person would kind of cover everything that's in this report that is state legislative or regulatory.
Probably not, because right now sorry, Johnny. Right now we have a sort of team approach on how we handle that. So Johnny does all the PUC.
Got it. Okay.
Moment, which is a significant workload. But for the state advocacy pieces, myself and others on the team contribute to that. And so I think it really is just a question of capacity to more.
Okay, Naomi, you're good. Veronica, do you have your hand up because you have a question?
No, I forgot to put it down. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, great. So proposal on the table is that Johnny could, we could add in a sentence in here, a recommendation around having some additional staffing help with this specific area, letting Johnny take the lead on maybe crafting that. Would anyone be opposed to that? Great, we reached consensus. Thank you. We're making progress. Everyone. Stay with us.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thanks, Johnny. That was a good catch.
All right.
And we've got through electricity supply. Woo! Okay, consumption and waste, I think should go pretty quickly. Veronica, you had a number of comments on here that I just hadn't, I'm not sure if we, the full task force had seen. So the first one, and Jasmine, you've really taken the lead on this. So if you also want to weigh in here, there was just a comment about adding NDPS buildings. I don't know, Liz, if you want to add here that about your comment about DPS buildings.
Liz, you're on mute. The point is that the city may not have authority over DPS buildings, so we can.
I just don't know. Yeah. I just don't know, and our interpretation may be different than theirs. I mean, that's all. I have no problem with it being in there. I don't want to hold up it being added. I just wanted to flag that it may not be as straightforward.
Yeah, so we've discussed this a number of times. That's why under phase 1, we actually have, you can still see on Jacob's screen right now, it says collaborate with DPS schools and higher education campuses to recycle and compost. So starting with elementary and middle schools and partnering with the Youth Sustainability Board, DPS Sustainability Department, and other zero waste school programs. Since, you know, that has been an ongoing discussion around if the city can mandate DPS to do anything, which it seems like they can't. So we opted out for collaborate instead under phase 1.
So Veronica, given that conversation, do you still want to push for NDPS buildings to be added, or would you be okay since it's collaborate and we're not sure we can require in phase 2?
I think that collaborate is fine. And it's just that I know there's DPS, it has several buildings, and it's a missed opportunity if we don't somehow at least investigate in phase 2 how to, because being in a school environment, if it's not required, and I don't have to do it because I have other things to do and worry about with students, I could see this falling off very easily on their radar. And so I don't know how to investigate. So we just push them a little bit more. And my biggest thing is how can we require businesses, but not DPS.
So sounds like you're okay though, Veronica, for leaving the language as is.
Yeah, I won't block it.
Jasmine, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so great. Thank you.
Can I jump in? There was in phase 2, I think in that section of phase 2, the last bullet, there was perhaps a typo that said post-recycled. And so it would be, and so I'm wondering if what was intended there was post-consumer recycled.
Okay, Jasmine, will you mind finding that typo and just fixing it real quick?
Yeah.
It's
wonderful.
Solution 3, phase 2, last bullet.
Wonderful. All right, consumption and waste is done. Last one, adaptation and resiliency.
I don't think there was anything in here.
And I don't think there's anything in here. Maybe, well, I think maybe Veronica had a couple things in here.
Maybe some late. Nope, nothing in there.
Okay, we're good. So all the recommendations, now Jacob's going to go through the revenue.
So content, we have consensus on content for the sections. Thank you, everyone. Now, we have a few small word changes in revenue, and because we spent so much time debating these, we really need to make sure we have some clarity here. So in the introduction to some of this, there's some language in here, which is my language. It is not task force language, but there was a general discussion about this, so that's why it's included. The mayor and council will need to work through which options are viable based on economic recovery. Thomas has suggested that it's not necessary to have that language. Any concerns about removing the language? Okay, so then we will move on. We don't need to weigh in on this, but there was a request for Celeste to add a couple paragraphs about how she and her team developed the cost estimates. So that's now in here. Yay. Okay, moving on. There is a suggestion around adding green banking as part of the types of measures. Unless there are serious concerns, I don't think we should weigh in on this. Embedded in this document is a question as to whether or not we should change climate change to climate crisis. So I would like to just maybe do a stop share and get people's thoughts. Are there any concerns around moving climate change to climate crisis? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, excellent. That went a lot faster than our other language issues, so thank you for that. We're wearing you down. Okay, so we'll just do a note in here, consensus reached.
Just on that point, sorry, I was trying to unmute and there was something in front of my mute button. There may be times in the document where you're actually referring to the scientific,
got it,
what climate change is. And so I just want to point out that we need to be careful when the editor is looking at it, that we don't use climate crisis when in fact we have to use climate change, but where it's appropriate to substitute climate crisis, then we should do that.
Great. There's a suggestion here on agreed to language around climate action task force recommends. And then there's this language in here that if city council determines a revenue initiative is viable, that council initiates a general sales tax. So the suggested language would be the climate action task force recommends that city council initiates a general sales tax referendum. Any concerns, please vocalize around that changed language. Okay, moving on. There is a suggestion to move from the fee could support incentives and policies to improve public transportation to the fee should. Any concerns with that? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, moving on. I would say this is similar in vein. Where did that go? Here we are. Similar in vein, directly linked to support multimodal transportation for parking meter fee increases. You can see that I embedded some language in the recommendation here based off of Pete's suggestion, such as multimodal transportation. Any concerns with that?
I would love it if it was more directly tied to transportation.
Transportation related climate actions such as multimodal transportation. So it's
transportation related. Okay, yep. That's fine. I missed that. Yep.
And then there is a suggestion around this dynamic pricing, fund stronger meter enforcement and staffing by 2023. So we're giving a date there. Alana indicated that it seems reasonable, but wanted to check with the group if that time frame was okay. Any concerns? Great. Another can versus should. This text comes from Alana's language, I think, describing what legally can be done. So this is not recommendation language, but there may be no concerns about impose a cost on society and should use that money to support other projects. And then again, moving in this such as multimodal transportation to alleviate the burden. Any concerns with either of those edits? I can basically only see Peep and Jasmine as task force members, and you guys are ready. You guys are ready. Let's keep moving down. I think that might have been.
I'm scrolling for you.
Oh, are you?
Between people, so don't worry.
Good. Okay, and then there's some clarification around what we mean by when revenue options are in phase 2 or phase 3, that we're really talking about doing the studying in advance so that if study indicates that it's viable, if the evaluation pans out, that it would be ready in time to fund phase 2 or phase 3. Any concerns about that? Okay, I think. Oh, this is a potentially one that may generate some discussion. There is some language here associated with the retailer tax, business income tax, that suggests making it, well, the language as written is based off of if sales tax is not passed, then to consider moving this forward. The suggestion is to remove that contingent on sales tax, since this will need to be studied anyway. Any concerns about removing this clause here? Okay.
Oh, wait,
yeah, go ahead.
I had the same problem that Liz did. My mute was covered up. Are we talking about just moving up the studying of this tax, the legality and feasibility? Is that
yeah,
what
so we're not talking about, so the studying, if the study indicated that it was viable, then it could be initiated for phase 2 funding. But the study would just be the study. And then, does that make sense, Kathy? Are you talking about the funding for this comment about this?
Yeah, about the business, because I think that needs, more study, more discussion, and I hate to say a broader stakeholder input on that, but that is one you're going to get pushback from the community on. So it sounded to me like if we're taking the sales tax out, that we're moving this from phase 2 to phase 1. And
no, I don't think, no, it would still live for studying as a phase 2 option, but it would no longer be contingent on whether or not sales tax passed as a phase 2 option.
And it's still just a study, Kathy. It was just, if the sales tax passed, then we wouldn't do this. But now it's, no matter if the sales tax passes or not, we are recommending that we study it.
Okay. In phase 1? Or because I guess what's tripping me up is the sentence, then the task force recommends moving this from a phase 2 to support phase 1 implementation. So that's what's tripping me up.
Yeah, that was there before. So it would be, I guess would we remove that whole sentence? Thomas, this is your suggestion.
Thomas?
You're on mute if you're talking, Thomas.
Sorry, I think removing that whole sentence would probably be best.
Kathy, are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Anybody have any issues with that? Okay, so done. So there was some question around whether for pay-as-you-throw, if we should guarantee this money goes to the CASR office. I know there's a lot of interest in this money. Liz, do you want to provide any context on this or your thoughts? Pay-as-you-throw.
I don't really have context to add. I mean, I think that money frees up money in the general fund, but right now, given the current economic situation, there is no money to be freed. And I think there's lots of other options here that we've explored that could provide dedicated funding to our office. And I think there's likely to be a larger conversation about the best use of that money that's freed up, whether it's for our office or other agencies in the city. If the task force is recommending that it be spent specifically to advance climate and sustainability, I would probably be more comfortable with that. But ultimately it's up to the task force.
So any task force thoughts on this? Any concerns? I guess let's phrase it in this way. Any concerns with making more explicit, perhaps down here in the recommendation, to support climate action in phase 2? Can we all live with that? Okay. Moving forward then. This may be again, this is similar of an interest in removing the indication if an energy tax was rejected by voters and does not appear on the ballot. we recommend. So it would just be, the task force recommends further exploring an increase in franchise fee in 2026. We recommend that the city work with Xcel Energy. So it would remove that language. Any concerns about that? All right, so moved. Okay, is that it? I've read this, I don't know how many times, and yet I can't remember. All right, this is just adding some specificity around next steps around ride hailing. So advocate for statewide ride hailing fee in the near term. That needs to be handled at a statewide level. So it's changing it from language that was explore conversations with or explore conversations to being more specific around advocacy. Any concerns about that? Okay. And let's see if there's anything else in here. Great, that was it. We do need to write a few next steps, which will essentially be wrapping up how this is being handed off to the mayor and city council and Denver government entities. But congratulations, I think that's.
Can we do one final? Can anyone?
Then we're going to do a final vote. Yeah, you call it, Marisol.
Made the tweaks that still have to be made that we have taken account of. If all of those are made, can anyone not support moving this report forward to city council and the mayor's office? Please.
I just have one question. Did we come to consensus on the suggestion from Emily in regards to carbon free?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Can anyone not can anyone not support moving this report forward?
So if I like this, am I raising my hand or not raising my hand?
Let's
don't talk. Just don't talk right now. Can anyone not live with this? Jacob?
Yeah, so let's do it in the reverse. Anybody who is in support of moving this forward or will not block? Oh no, it's an ad.
I think it's good for you.
Come on.
I teed it up.
Hold on. Per my rule that I instigated at the beginning of this process, I would like to go on record as the only against vote for this report. And the reason I'm doing that is more of a symbolic reason. Of course, I want this report to pass, but I'd like my official stance to show that I'm against this because I think we have a ton of work to do, and I think the record needs to show that.
Is there a different way that we can show that, Sebastian? Because
yeah, Sebastian, I don't think you could be the MC presenting to city council if you block it. So we might have to relook at that.
Fair enough. I'll stand down.
Okay. Great. So everyone take your beverage, take a cheers. Some of you have already been drinking. I saw you as I was scrolling through. Don't think I didn't see that. Cheers, everybody. You did amazing work. This was incredible. I'm going to say 2 seconds on the rollout, and then we want to close and get you out of here. So the rollout has a couple different pieces. Some of you are going to be doing an op-ed. We will be looking for you to sign off on it. Hopefully it can come from the entire task force. We're working through those details. There's also going to be a presentation to City Council, one of their committees in mid-July. There's a subgroup that has been just started working on how to present and who to present. So we will continue to be in touch with you on that. If you have any concerns or want to be involved, we pulled most of that from the survey we did a few weeks ago. As a closing though, we would love, love, love to hear what you're most proud of in this process. This has been long, and I'm going to get emotional because I cry all the time. We have gone through COVID. We're going through riots. We are tackling a really tough topic.
And we have all done it together and gotten to know each other. And this has been an amazing process. And I'm so proud to have been able to be with you all. And I would love it as we started with good news, and if we could end with what you're really proud of moving forward. So whoever wants to go, go.
I'll start us off.
I've got one. I am most proud of this group for spending 2.5 to 3 hours in a single meeting, and for everyone's dedication to the future of our city and sustainability and climate action. So cheers all.
Thank you, Jasmine.
I'll go. I'm just so amazed at it, because there's such a wide variety of places from which we've all come to this task force, and a lot of difficult conversations that could have been handled in ways that weren't as positive as our discussions were. And I'm just so proud of the fact that we were able to have hard discussions in a way that moved the process forward. So thank you all for letting me be a part.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'm super proud of the process of reaching consensus and the experience of reaching consensus with people I didn't fully expect to reach consensus with. And just know anytime if I've pushed or something, it's because I love this city and love this community. And anytime, I've seen another member push, I know it's because you feel the same way. So cheers.
I'll echo what Emily said. This is honestly my priority in life. And I think you guys have probably realized that. And it's been really great to be able to work with all of you and get to know new people in the community that are working on these types of things as well. And people who are from other sectors. And it's so great to just see everybody come together and really create some of the most aggressive climate goals probably in the country. So I'm just really proud of all the work that we've all done together and the amount of time that we've put into this. It's super important.
Thanks.
I would just add, I feel like I've learned so much from all of you. I work in my various bubble, and there's just so much insight about this work around climate change that I now have. And I share with my friends, my family, people in other cities that are trying to do this work. So I feel like I'm adding value in that regard by sharing that message. And to Thomas's point around setting some really bold goals, when I talk to friends who are just care so much about climate change, I'm like, look at the report that's going to come out of this task force. You will be happy and proud, and we need your support to make sure that these things happen. So I feel like the work has just begun, but we have a great playbook, and I'm just thankful to have been a part of that and look forward to working with you all as we move forward.
Thanks, Naomi.
Cheers.
I'm really proud that we have equity as a center of this, and I think it's going to be the basis for what we're going to pursue, at the level. I'm doing this work a really, really long time, and it's hard. And this is the year I would say that I've heard the words low income, energy, equity, climate change, social justice together in many, many sentences. And it's really, really exciting. And I am so excited just to work with a lot of you moving this stuff forward, especially on the transportation side. I think that's something I learned a ton about here. And it's just really encouraging.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm someone who tends to worry, and I worry about climate change. I worry about how it's affecting people now. I worry about our future, and I come away from every one of these meetings, even these Zoom meetings where my butt gets tired from just sitting and looking at this screen for 3 hours. I come away feeling hopeful. And that's because you all are not only obviously passionate about this and passionate about Denver and about the communities that you represent, but also you're really smart. And so there's smart, passionate people working on this, and that makes me really hopeful. So cheers to all of you.
Thanks, Dominique. And we hope everyone can stay on just a few more minutes. I know Joel and Council President Clark would like to say a couple words, and we also have a recording from the mayor we want to share with you also. So, but I don't want to cut anybody off.
I'll just jump in real quick. I'm really proud to, and I'm going to say this with all the love in the world, not to be a token. And like you said, it's emotional because you come to something like this thinking you're going to teach, and I walked away learning a lot. I learned about equity, and I thought I was one of the players, and I learned a lot from so many people. I learned about cultures. I learned about the climate. I'm just really proud of, after 25 years of serving on all sorts of committees and boards with the city, that results actually happen. I've actually never seen it done this way before. And the expertise and the lack of egos that existed, even when we disagreed, was truly phenomenal. And I would end with Maya Angelou and saying, "And still we rise."
Yeah. Thanks, Lori.
Beautifully said, Lori. That was amazing. I'd like to say that I do my first task force meeting with absolutely sweaty palms and soaked shirt, armpits, and it was also my 18th birthday. I'd like to thank everyone for being so accepting and welcoming, even as a 17-year-old, for most of this process, and treating me like I was exactly at the same level as everyone else in this task force. And I'd like to just say that I've learned that everyone from every walk of life on this task force, in every background and profession and industry, everybody has good intentions, and that's why they were selected to be on here. I truly believe in the good in everybody on this task force, and would like to wish the best for everyone.
Thanks, Sebastian.
And I would just like to echo off of that, especially with Lori going, this is Micaela. I have to say thank you so much being in and the only Indigenous voice on this task force. It really feels good to be seen and to be heard. I really appreciate all the help, especially from Jacob. And, you know, I came on this task force really not knowing a lot. And for the love that I have for my city, I'm really honored to be a part of this task force. And I absolutely learned so much, and I'm excited to see what more work that we can do. So thank you so much, Toshka, to you all.
Thank you, Micaela.
You know, there's so many incredibly heavy things in our world right now with the economy and racial inequality and all these things. And I have to say that coming here and spending time with all of you and learning from all of you, this has given me hope and confidence that we're going to turn things around, and so many great people putting so much effort and love into this. I feel very honored to have been a part of this with you all.
Thanks, John.
I'd like to also say thank you to everyone here, and especially I am continually awed, Sebastian, by your commitment and I really appreciate you being a great teacher through this process, as well as everyone, folks that I don't interact with. Peep, I love your diligence. And I just kind of feel, I just want to say thank you, but I think this is just the first step. I mean, I have to say, from meeting with some folks in our coalition, I'm going to be counting on a lot of you to be coming and sitting down and explaining certain things, because there is an immense road ahead, which even even in terms of what goes forward to city council, because there's just going to be a lot of people that will come out of the woodworks. And so we have only just begun. I hate to sound like I don't know how old that song is, but yeah.
Sing it for us, Patty.
No, I really, you don't want that. But we have just begun this process.
Thanks, Patty.
I just want to say thanks, everybody. You helped me make Zoom acceptable and fun, which it was very intimidating to me in the beginning, but Zoom actually ended up being fun with you all. And I felt since January like I was in an incredibly intense master's class where I thought I knew the subject matter, and it turns out I really had no idea. And I had to study like heck to keep up with all you. And I know I'm not the only one. Because this was like unpeeling a major onion. Like you thought you got one layer, and then you hit the next one, and then you hit the next one, and it was a amazing learning experience. So thank you.
Thanks. Council President Clark, would you like to say anything?
I know you're running late, and so thank you. I just want to say thank you so much to all of you. What you have done here, what you have accomplished together, especially at this time in history, and everything that we all and our world is going through is awe-inspiring, and it's so powerful to watch this task force start and launch with a race and social justice training, and to continue every week to keep that at the forefront of this work, and especially, you know, with where we are today, but to know that that's where this started, you know, months ago, and how you all have done that. You're just such an amazing group of people. I mean, even just to watch you all battle and grapple and dig in today for hours again, and then to end with all of the beautiful things that you all said to each other and about each other is inspiring to me. And I'm excited that you are going to give us this gift that is a roadmap for our new Office of Climate Action, which is not even officially a real thing quite yet, I don't believe, until July, to start with this. That's a gift that you have given to the citizens of Denver. It's a gift that you've given to the citizens of planet Earth, and for City Council to have that laid out in front of us, to look at how do we enact your vision, and all of the people that you came to bring a voice to this table for, that you all represented as you were fighting and grappling in a respectful way, but in a passionate way on all of these issues. So I just want to say thank you to all of you. I don't think I've ever seen anything in my 5 years in an elected office that brought this many council members in to the stands to watch. I mean, I'm not sure there was a week I came where we didn't have a majority of council here sitting in the bleachers to watch all of you do your work. That is testament to how impressed we all are with you and with what you did. And we are so lucky to have you. And I just want to say thank you. And, you know, echo that, where do we go from here? We'll have the task force, it looks like, presenting on July 15th. And would love to have as many of you there, socially distanced and wearing a mask in our chambers to talk about this process. That's 10:30 to noon on July 15th. And then I will immediately, and I know there are other council members on here, we'll immediately start looking at how do we put this into action, and starting to, with your recommendation that is timely about trying to see if we can put forward a different option to the voters this November, and try to have that ready for that meeting to show you that we're not just here to watch and we're not just here to listen, but we're here to take action on the charges that you have given us. And so should that, if we can get that put together and figure that out in a very hard time to be talking about the ballot and what's on it, then that would be in committee that day as well. And on first reading in front of council or introduction on July 27th. And then on August 3rd, we would do final reading, public comment, where you can comment on, did we get it right? Are we living up to the charge that you gave us on that one item before we take on the next one? And so I hope that you'll be able to join us along the way as we as we continue to tackle what you've given us. Thank you all so much. You are amazing and inspiring for me.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Liz, do you want to say anything?
Hey, can I, before
This
Liz
has
jumps
really
on,
been.
can I offer a toast to Liz and the team? When we had a conversation at the beginning of this, I talked about trying to get on this thing and talk this through. And I had no idea that Liz was going to turn over her future 10 years of work to the 24 of us who have no idea, honestly, what we're doing. It's pretty clear. And yet Liz and the whole team there have been so supportive and so helpful. And we've said, hey, you know what'd be great? What if we just banned all cars? And Liz, with a smile, said, well, let me evaluate that. And never told us no, never said, guys, that's impossible. And, you know, I respect that so much. And I know that we're turning over this plan to the council, assuming and hoping that the council can pull it forward. But then once it gets approved and once the voters get behind it, knowing that Liz and the team over there are going to have 10 years of work ahead of them. And I feel very confident that we're going to leave the place better because of that team. So before Liz gets a chance to say anything, I wanted to interrupt and offer a toast and thank you for your support on this, Liz, and the rest of the team.
Thank you. I was just going to say this has been a highlight of my career and my life. I mean, this is an amazing group of people, and stepping outside of your comfort zone and bringing people together who may have very different viewpoints on how to approach this work is really powerful. I have loved every moment of this process. And I know the whole team, you know, Grace, Katrina, Amber, Sunrisa, Julie, Mike, Taylor, Susan, Jana, all of our folks are, you know, just, you know, totally excited, you know, to see how we can move this forward together. You know, you all have been able to see the experience and the expertise of everybody working with you, from, you know, Johnny helping the electricity group, and Maria and Katrina and Amber and Jan working with the buildings team, and, you know, everybody kind of pulling together, Alana helping on transportation. You know, I think for all of us, it's been an amazing experience to work with you. And I hope that will continue. And I wanted to share, you know, that we want to continue this engagement. It may not be in this exact same format, but Grace has a lot of great ideas about how to expand the advisory capacity for our office and bring new people into that process. And so as soon as we have a plan in place after our office officially launches on July 1, then we'll let you know and we'll invite you into that process. We want to keep talking with you and learning from you. So thank you so much. And can we give a huge round of applause to our fabulous facilitators, Marisol and Jacob.
Yay.
We love you guys. You're the best.
Thanks. I'm a wreck. Train wreck. It's been an honor.
Absolutely. A highlight for us too. We do have a message from the mayor. So we'll play that, and then people are welcome to stay on if people want to keep talking or sharing more toasts, etc. But let's make sure we do this. I have a feeling there will not be an ad in this video. So let's see.
Good afternoon, Climate Action Task Force. Thank you for your dedication to this important effort and for persevering in the wake of unprecedented struggles facing the community we serve. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the health crisis many of us already knew plagues our communities of color and low-income households. This crisis will only be intensified by the impact of a changing climate with worsening air quality, high heat days, and drought. The public safety crisis has exposed the vast inequity in our society, where some people believe they are safe and protected, while many, too many, feel cast out, unprotected, and oppressed. Hey, I was there when you started meeting 6 months ago and quickly gained momentum, gathering input from Denverites representing every corner of our city. and synthesizing scores of ideas into a cohesive plan. But we know what happened. In March, you had to immediately pivot to virtual meetings, discussions, and online forums. You worked tirelessly to ensure a high level of engagement with our community and incorporated that input into your plan. I imagine the recommendations you plan to submit will be meaningful and therefore challenging. I am ready to hear your ideas and your hopes for our city. We have a solid team in our new Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. And I am confident they are ready to lead the charge and ensure Denver earns its place as a global leader in this movement. Thank you again for the time you have volunteered to serve on the Climate Action Task Force and the faith you have in us to take the ball and carry it across the finish line. Good afternoon, Climate Action Task Force. Thank you for your dedication to this important.
Oh no, we have to start over again.
No. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Anybody who needs to leave can. Anybody who would like to stay on and just hang out, and like if we were going to do a happy hour, have a happy hour with us, you're welcome to stay on. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and just thank you.
Thank you. I got to jump to a Biden thing. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you July 15th at 10:30 with a mask on.
Awesome. We will send out more information also, so don't worry. We'll remind you all.
Bye. Great job. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. I will send that flyer via email for those of you that asked for it.
Thanks,
Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thanks,